This video has been brought to you by the Landscape Certified Contractors Association. Due to the membership support, we're able to bring content to each and every one of you. If you have a topic or a product you'd like us to review, or if you want to become a member, visit www.irrigatortech.com and hope to hear from you soon. Enjoy the video.
With ET Water, but I'm gearing my talk today to talk about smart controllers in general. I might have a couple of slides that may be ET Water related, but I think pretty much whatever that I'm going to discuss today is pretty general to the smart controller field. I would also like it to open it up, so as I'm talking, if you have a question or comment, feel free to jump in. I don't want to be up here talking for 45 minutes and you may have a question that's been rattled around in your brain for a while. So if there's something I'm saying that you either agree with, disagree with, or would like to add to, feel free to jump on in from that standpoint. And then we'll go from there. So first thing I have to do is I have to recognize that, like a lot of seminars, I'm preaching to the choir. The people that probably should be here aren't here. The people that probably know this stuff are already sitting in the room. So I understand the fact that you guys probably are at the top of your game in regards to water management, water conservation. The people that aren't at the top of their game, they're not even bothering here to listen to the talk. So we'll go from that standpoint. So first of all, why are we here and why are we having this right now? Well, the reason we're having the smart controller discussion today is that July is kind of National Smart Water Month. So the Smart Water Irrigation Month was put on and introduced by the Irrigation Association probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And every July, distributors will offer specials on smart controllers and maybe nozzles and things like that. Every year there will be different talks and seminars and articles that are written about smart irrigation. So July typically is the month that we're up here talking about smart irrigation in general. This talks about, again, back in 2014, the discussion about high efficiency nozzles and controllers and why we're doing July. July typically is also, in most cases, the peak irrigation month of the year. So we want to bring awareness to water conservation during July more so than any other month. What we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about a little bit about the water crisis in California. Obviously, it's affecting all of our jobs. It can affect us in a good way. It can also affect us in a bad way, as we'll talk about. We're also going to look at an overview of what is a smart controller, how is it different than what we have been maybe used to using in years past. We're going to talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of smart technology, what it can do for you, what it can't do for you, some of the pitfalls, some of the advantages of each. And then we're going to discuss how to make the best use of the smart controllers that are on the market from that standpoint. Well, one of the reasons we're here is that we're kind of getting the brunt of the conservation movement. It's easy to see why we're getting nailed in regards to why we're running out of water. When you look at a typical residence, they're talking about half of the water for a residence is typically being used for outside landscaping. So we're kind of the easy fruit, we're the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. We're easy to be picked on. And that's why they're immediately going after us and saying, hey, cut off the irrigation in the islands, and we don't want to see irrigation on turf, and you're going to water only 2 days a week, and so on. So we're kind of an easy target in our industry as far as going after us. They talk about, though, that the residential use of water represents about 5% of the total water use in California. So if it's 5% of total water use is residential, and then we're 50% of that, that's about 2.5%. And if they're trying to save maybe 30 or 40% of that, we're talking about potential savings in landscaping representing maybe a 1 or 2% savings in water overall for California. So we're not as low-hanging fruit as a lot of people would believe us to be. But we have to do what we have to do. Again, they talk about here that 50% of the water use is outside is caused by wasted irrigation. The one thing I will have to say, though, is that if you look at a lot of irrigation practices, there is a lot of room for improvement. When you look at typical irrigation practices and what people do, there's a lot of waste there. The problem is we have a pendulum that's swinging from watering all the time, wasting a lot of water, and now all of a sudden shut the water off. There's a lot of middle ground there that we're not covering, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. This is brand new as of a couple of days ago, and this shows you the intensity of the water. So the way it colors out here is that D4, which is this dark color, is exceptional drought. And if you look over here at the, let's see, start of the calendar year, current is the top row there. Current right now, 46% of the state is considered to be exceptional drought. 71% of the state is considered to be extreme drought. And over 98% of the state is considered to be in severe drought. When you look at that versus maybe last year, 1 year ago, we were actually we had more going on in the severe and extreme, but actually more in the exceptional drought. So it seems to be like we're a little better off than we were a year ago, but the awareness for water conservation is much higher. If you were to pull back this map from 3 or 4 years ago, the map would not look anything like that by color. You would see a lot more of the state that's in kind of the peach color or the yellow color instead of the dark red. So this shows you that we are in a real problem right now with the water use. You only have to go online, pick up any newspaper, any day of the week, and they're going to highlight the drought, highlight the drought, highlight the drought. And again, we're the low-hanging fruit, so they're going to be jumping on us as far as where the waste is. It's in the landscaping. It's our cities. They're not doing a good job of maintaining the parks. They're wasting water. They have a lot of islands with grass in it. They're wasting water. They got you now reporting your neighbors when they're irrigating on the wrong days. So it's, again, it's gotten to be fairly extreme from that standpoint. The thing they're not talking about is, right now we're not irrigating any of the islands. Well, for those cities that have more modern irrigation, that may work out okay because you might have separate irrigation for the trees. But there's a lot of irrigation that's out there on those islands where the only irrigation out there is the overhead spray that is there to take care of both the lawn and the plant material. And when you turn off the one, the other's not getting any irrigation. This is a picture I took yesterday up in Santa Clarita. And the lawn doesn't look as bad here, but it's dead, basically. And what you're seeing is PVC pipe, it's probably Dura pipe, with Dura fittings laying out on top of the ground. And what they in essence have done is they've gone back to the valve and they've just disconnected the irrigation from the spray system, and they have on-grade PVC pipe that is going to every tree in this island, and they're irrigating the trees with this temporary irrigation system. It looks horrible. I mean, it is really ugly because as you're driving down the street, you just see all these rows of PVC pipe laying on top of the ground. I couldn't tell what they were doing as far as what kind of emission device they had at the end of each of these. Based on the fact that the emission is very close to the trunk of the tree, I'm thinking they either have a bubbler or maybe even a spray nozzle that's screwed on there to kind of, manage the amount of flow for each of these areas. But this is horrible. That's not what I want to be seeing in our neighborhoods as far as the irrigation. At least these guys are thinking about the trees. I'm sure there are plenty of applications where they have shut down the irrigation on those islands, and no one's considering the fact that it's summertime, and those trees right now are in their peak growing season, and they're not getting any irrigation. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is the trees are going to start to stress out. They're going to be more susceptible to disease and pathogens and other things, and they're going to suffer, and you'll see that down the road. The other thing we don't talk about is they're telling you guys to cut back on your water use. These water agencies typically work on a fixed budget. And if you cut back the water use by 30%, guess what has to happen? The rates have got to go up 30%. Because again, they're on a fixed budget. They need to pull in, let's say it's $1 million in revenue, and you guys only pull in, give them $750,000, they got to make up that extra $250,000. They're not a profit organization. They're a break-even organization. They're non-profit. So what happens is, I want you to save 30% on your water bill. Oh, by the way, we're going to raise the rates to you. So you're going to save the water, but in the long run, you may not actually be saving any money because the water rates are going to go up accordingly to cover those savings in the water from that standpoint. Areas like the Desert Water Agency and Coachella out in the desert, those guys are really suffering. They have water in their aquifers under the ground. They have a lot of electricity because of all the windmills and whatnot, but it's really getting tough out there because there's a lot of snowbirds in the desert. These people that fly in from all over the country, you know what they love? They love their lawns. And one of the things, so they're having a lot of fighting going on in the desert where you know, they're saying, we need you to cut back the lawns, and these snowbirds are saying, you're not touching my lawns, leave it alone. You know, if we have to pay a little bit more, we'll pay a little bit more for that. This is the Irvine Ranch service area, IRWD, and we can look at the light blue one on top, but this shows you what is called a tiered water rate structure. Now, there have been some lawsuits going on, I think with San Juan Capistrano, where the HOA sued the water district because they said tiered water rates are illegal. You have to charge me the same rate for the product. You're not allowed to do tiers. Surprisingly, the HOA won. This was about 2 or 3 years ago, and they just had it brought up to the appeals court in California, and they withheld it. So right now, technically, at least with the HOA in San Juan Capistrano, it is illegal to charge tiered water rates. So the concern is all the other cities and water agencies are looking at this, seeing where this is going to go. Because it's almost kind of in contradiction to what's going on with the water savings. The feeling is that if they end up holding this up and they make the tier water rate structures illegal, they'll just jack the water rates up for everybody. They'll figure some way to get it covered. But here with IRWD, we can look at their water rates, and what we're looking at here is these 4 numbers on the right. And we talk about low volume, which is up to 40% of normal use. They're charging you $1.11 per unit of water. When you go to the base rate, which is around 100% or slightly below, it's $1.62. Not that much more, a little bit more. When you get to the wasteful area, which is basically 34% above normal, that's not that much more. It's not like we're talking 600%. We're talking about a 30% increase in water use. Your water rates jump from $1.62 per unit to almost $15 a unit. It gets to be really expensive to keep that landscape looking good. And if you're working with an HOA, you've got to go back to the homeowners and go, hey, we screwed up, we had a big break, or we didn't do a good job managing the irrigation system. We're going to have to assess everybody an extra $40 this month to help pay for the water. That's not easy to tolerate. The same thing in the cities. If the city's not doing a good job in maintaining their irrigation properly, there's a budget, and you're going to be going over the budget. So this is typical of what's happening right now. And I would surmise these rates are going to go up as people are starting to cut the irrigation back because they got to cover the cost again. Okay, so enough with why we're doing this. Yes?
You said $1.11 a unit. What is a unit? Is it 750 gallons? 40, 740.
I don't know what it is for IRWD. CCF? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about smart controllers. What's a smart controller? Well, the first thing is, what is this, how do you define a smart controller, and what is this funky logo that you see around on all the smart clocks and even on toilets and nozzles and so on? There's an organization that's ran by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. All of you guys in your homes probably have Energy Star appliances, correct? You got the Energy Star washer and dryer and refrigerator and all the other appliances. Well, Energy Star is ran by the EPA. And the manufacturers of those washers and dryers and refrigerators had to go through testing, licensing, and labs to have their products qualify as Energy Star. Once they're qualified, they're allowed to put the Energy Star logo on their equipment, and then the various electric agencies will offer rebates if you purchase a qualified Energy Star appliance. So about 5 years ago, the EPA got involved in the water side of things, and they kind of took it over from the Irrigation Association, but they didn't want to call it Energy Star, so they came up with WaterSense. So us as a manufacturer of controllers and the guys that are making those wonderful Rainbird spray nozzles and rotating nozzles and whatnot had to go through the same labs and testing and processes to get their products WaterSense approved. So now the various water agencies simply put out a list of any of the products that are WaterSense approved as being on the rebate list. So instead of having to test them themselves, they just use the EPA's list as kind of the Bible, so to speak, for the rebates. So again, all us manufacturers had to go through a lot of hoops, make changes in our equipment to qualify and make sure we got the guidelines in there to be what is called WaterSense, EPA certified. And as such, we're on all those rebate lists like Tom talked about earlier. What in essence a smart controller is and how it varies from controllers of old is controllers of old, basically you set the time, you set the start times, you set the day pattern, and it never adjusted. It's just locked in. It just keeps doing the same thing over and over again until you make the decision to go to the clock and make the physical changes in the field. Smart controllers have the ability to self-adjust. So they have the ability to adjust themselves, either run times or days of operation or whatever, based on changes in the environment. So some of these controllers will do that through sensors in the ground, moisture sensors that can monitor and say, hey, the ground's wet, I don't need irrigation today, so I'm not going to put irrigation on there. It could be some sort of little weather device hooked up to the clock that again says, hey, the temperature's been pretty low. Based on the temperature and the historical information of the clock, I'm going to forego irrigation today. There's a lot of products that are out there like ours that are tied into a weather network. So we're monitoring the evapotranspiration on a daily basis. And until we get to the point where we need to put more water back in the tank, we will forego irrigation until that occurs. So all these devices, one way or another, have an ability to adjust themselves automatically to the changes in weather. As the weather gets warmer, your run times will either get longer or your frequency will increase. As the weather gets cooler, the run times will shorten up or the frequency will stretch itself out. So instead of watering every 3 days, maybe it's going to water every 4 days and so on. So that's kind of the definition of smart controller. Pretty much every manufacturer that's out there has a product that will fall into that range as being a smart controller from that standpoint. These are the clocks of old. So again, I've been in the business a while. I worked for Rainbird back in the early 80s and helped develop some of the commercial clocks. And this is kind of the stuff we were dealing with, is they were hard set controllers. This happens to be a Toro, I think, Moist-O-Matic that is actually hydraulic. So there wasn't any electrical wires going out to the field. There were copper tubes that ran out to every valve. And it was actually hydraulic, no electricity involved from that standpoint. And I don't know how long you guys have been in the business, but this is one of Rainbird's mainstays back in the 80s with the RC7s. This one was kind of their newer one because you can see they changed some of the graphics on it to make it look really modern. But it's the exact same product. It's just a bunch of knobs and dials. It's got 2 motors behind there that are spinning all the time. And these devices had very limited features. You basically push the pins in and out, you set the days you want to water, you set the start times, and then you have the knob to adjust for the run times. If you set it for 5 minutes, maybe 6, maybe 3, it's close. It's plastic, come on from that standpoint. So that's kind of what we had to deal with in the past. So the past is on the left. And the way you can relate to this is look at what you do in your homes as far as your thermostats for your heating or air conditioning. In the past, we were lucky and had air conditioning or heating. We had a thermostat on the left-hand side. And you simply turn the knob to a value, 72 degrees or 78 degrees. That's all you could do. And it would just simply, as the temperature got to that degree, it would kick the air on. Temperature got below that degree, it would turn the air off. That's as much as it could happen. Well, in modern times, we have devices like the one on the right where you can actually get in and program, well, I like it 72 degrees when I get up in the morning, but I'm not going to be here during the day, so at 8 o'clock, have it go up to 82, and then maybe about 3 in the afternoon, have it go down maybe to 80, and then by the time I get home, I want it back at 78. But when I go to bed, I'm going to have it turn off completely. So these things are much more sophisticated. It can do a lot more, and in the long run, what you're really doing is you're saving electricity. You're saving money, and that's the name of the game. So these aren't more complicated just for the sake of being more complicated. They're more complex because they can do more for you. In the long run, make you more comfortable. In the long run, make our plants healthier and save money and save water. So that's kind of where we're at in regards to smart controller technology. So we'll look a little bit about the then and the now and talk about what's changed. So back in my Rainbird days, way back when, we had centralized control systems. So at the time, we were developing Maxicom. And that was kind of the grandfather of the central control products. So all the manufacturers had products. Toro had the Network 8000, Motorola had the MIR system, Rainbird had the Maxicom, and so on. So those were of the days of old. Now what we have is we have these non-dedicated internet drives. So instead of having to worry about having a computer sit in the corner that was running the central for the city or the HOA, we no longer have dedicated equipment doing that. So it's much more fluid, it's much easier, we're not dedicated to a machine that if it were to crap out, the whole system's going to go down. Back in the days you had local software. You would have a floppy disk. Back in my days it started off as a 5 1/4 floppy, and it was floppy. Then it went to the 3 1/2 little mini floppy disk and so on. But again, you'd have to load that in the machine, and you had a dedicated machine with that software on it. Whenever there was a change made, some features were added or bugs were fixed, we'd have to send out another floppy disk and hope that you guys updated your machine. Now, pretty much everything is web-based, or a lot of the manufacturers have gone to the web, and there are tons and tons of advantages to having a web-based system versus a dedicated machine sitting in the corner. Number one, whenever the system is updated with new capabilities, it's instantly done online. There's nothing to send out to the users to make sure they've installed it in their machines. Every customer is on the same platform. Another benefit of the web-based system is it's not a dedicated computer. I can access it from home, from the office, from that office, from that office. I can access it on a tablet at Starbucks. I can hop online on my smartphone. So you have much more mobility with these web-based systems versus a dedicated hardware system from that standpoint. There's lots and lots of advantages to that. On the older systems, all your schedules are backed up on your machine. Well, as I say, it's not if the hard drive is going to crash, it's when it's going to crash. So if you're not doing a good job of keeping things backed up, if that machine were to go down, you've now lost your information. And if you have a large system, that can be very hurtful and expensive and painful to have to pull all that information back into the system. With everything being on the web, or everybody going towards the web, that's all stored online on server farms. So the benefit would be that if one server farm were to go down, there are others out there that have backups of that. So as an example with us, we're on 3 different server farms in 3 different states. And we use the same company that Amazon uses. So if one building were to burn down, or they were to get hit with lightning or something that were to take out all of their servers, that's okay because there's 2 redundant server farms that have all that information in there, so they don't have to worry about it. If your hard drive crashes and you have a local system, you better have good backups, otherwise you're dead in the water from that standpoint. In old days, the communication typically was hardwire. So we had systems, we would literally run miles upon miles of hardwire from clock to clock. Or it went from that to radio communication, where we would have communication from point A to point B with radio equipment. In some cases, we have what used to be called repeaters. So we'd have a phone line go into a repeater and then radio out to the field. FCC continues to make changes on radio frequencies, so you got to change your equipment and so on. It is also very expensive hardware up front. So technically you could say there was no ongoing communication costs, but there really was because you'd have to replace the equipment every so often. These radios would typically have a lifespan of 5 years or so, and you'd have to replace the radios, and that would cost you more money out of pocket. Going to communication that's more cellular or Wi-Fi, like a lot of manufacturers are going, the initial cost is less because we're not buying this expensive radio equipment. There is ongoing cost, but when you look at the cost of doing business, it's less money out of pocket, and over the long haul, it's equal or less than what you would have done if you would have bought all the expensive equipment up front from that standpoint. Days of old, we had dedicated weather stations. So if you had an older Maxicom system or a network system, whatever else, Rainmaster system, you had a dedicated weather station on site. So you had a Campbell Scientific weather station that would cost you $15,000 to put on site. A lot of golf courses still have this today. You have more localized weather, but you're also kind of under the control of that weather device, and if it doesn't get maintained properly, you got problems. So those of us, and we're not the only ones that have gone to the web, we're using weather networks. So we're using networks where there may be thousands of weather stations out that are being maintained by these networks. There's a lot of software behind the scenes that is monitoring all those sensors on those weather stations so that if one were to go down, those systems will automatically turn off that weather device and reroute you to the next closest one. So it makes it a lot easier as far as it's one less thing you have to worry about in regards to troubleshooting or paying for or servicing from that standpoint. Complicated flow monitoring. Flow sensing has gotten easier today with most of the systems. You know, one of the things we'll talk about a little later is the fact that, and Tom kind of alluded to it, is the fact that, hey, you're limited to 2-day-a-week watering. Why do you need irrigation clocks at all? Why do you need smart controllers? I got to have peak irrigation usage in the summer because I'm only getting 2 days out of it. Well, a lot of people are looking at smart controllers not only for the fact that it does the scheduling for you, but it also gives you the flow sensing capability and gives you that information remotely. So I'm dealing with an HOA, and they had no interest in going to smart clocks until they had their first mainline break. And when they had that mainline break and it ran for 5 hours, guess what happened to their water bill that month? It went through the roof. They went from tier 1 to tier 4. And now all of a sudden they're going, holy, you know, it cost us an extra, you know, $4,000 this month for the water bill. If they would have had a system that had flow sensing built in and had the ability to remotely tell you about that information and respond to it, that would have eliminated the problem. So now all of a sudden they're interested in smart controllers because that would have saved them money. In the days of old, even with IRWD, if you had a break, you could go to them and say, hey, look, we had a problem, we had a break, you're going to see that our water use went up. Can you work with us? They go, yeah, no problem, we'll adjust the water bill for you to accommodate that. That doesn't happen anymore. It is your responsibility to maintain your water usage. If you have a problem, that's your problem. If you had a break, that means you guys weren't doing something you should have been doing in regards to either putting the right equipment in or monitoring or maintaining your system. If you blow through the water, you're paying for it. That's the way it works. Firmware updates in the past. I don't know if anybody ever has an old Maxicom system here, but we literally used to send out chips. We would literally send out a chip you had to put in your CCU, and hopefully you did, so you were on the same version of firmware and software. Up until recently, we would have to go out in the field on our product, like other manufacturers, and plug a laptop into the controller and reprogram the chip that's inside of the device. We have gone to over-the-air updates, so we have what is called OTA, which means whenever we make a significant change on the equipment, we don't have to send out a chip or even go to the field. We can send the firmware update out over the air, and that eliminates a lot of time spent running around, and it also guarantees that all of our customers are going to be in the same platform again. So it's a lot easier to maintain, you know, one software online and one hardware. It's all one thing. If I have combinations of guys running certain software and certain guys that have updates in the field and not, I get all these, you know, compatibility issues I have to worry about. So there's a lot of benefits to that. The newer systems today also give you electrical diagnostics on smart clocks. So again, if you're doing this remotely, if your system has the ability to communicate, you're going to know about those wire breaks and those shorted valves and those dead shorts, and you can respond to that. In some cases, you can respond to that as a preemptive method. So you can see when the solenoid's beginning to burn out. So instead of waiting for the solenoid to completely crap out, you can say, hey, look, this thing's getting up to, you know, 800, 900, 1,000 milliamps. I think maybe it's time to get out there and replace the solenoid before it fails. Because again, I don't get a lot of opportunities for water. I can't afford to throw a couple of those opportunities away. So I'll get out there and replace that solenoid. I'll have that as far as an alarm list. I can get out there and fix those ahead of time and not have to worry about it after the fact. And then, of course, the beauty of today's technology is, in many cases, you don't need to have the expensive field remotes that you've had to have in the past. You can actually use your smartphones or tablets as field remotes. So as an example, one of the reasons that Caltrans in District 7, which is Los Angeles, uses a lot of our product is that they're concerned about the safety of their people. So they had 3 guys die over the last 2 years getting hit by cars. And the reason they got hit is they were out there managing their irrigation systems. So whenever they would want to go out there and troubleshoot, they'd have to park their truck, get out of their truck, go to the clock, unlock the clock, plug in a remote, kind of try to lock it up a little bit, and then go walk the project, and then repeat that same process to get onto the next clock. So they were vulnerable because they were out there amidst the traffic. Now with the ability to do everything from a phone or a tablet, They can stay protected in their vehicle with their lights flashing. They don't need to go to the clock at all. They can sit there and go through the station, see what's going on, make notes as to what needs to be repaired, and then when they're done, they simply go to the next controller. So they use it from a standpoint of protection, liability. And then currently, most manufacturers use what is called ET history. So what happens is we look to see what the weather has been, and then we schedule that moving forward. So in our case, we look at the last 7 days of ET, and we look at a daily average of what that value is, and that's how we schedule moving forward. Where everybody's going, at least where we're going, is we're going into what is called predictive analytics, which means, hey, we're already getting information from the weather networks on what the temperature is supposed to be tomorrow and the next day, and whether we're going to have Santa Ana winds or so on. So instead of waiting for those conditions to come, we can look ahead and say, hey, look, we're going to have a cool down at the end of the week. Why don't we start ramping the irrigation back now and save that extra irrigation? Or if it looks like Santa Ana winds are going to kick in, why not throw a little bit more water now to put the plants in a better state of health so they can tolerate this condition towards the end of the week when we have the Santa Anas? So you're going to see a lot of stuff going to more predictive analytics from that standpoint. So we talk about the various users that are out there. Everybody has their own particular needs and wants for smart controller technology. Some customers are looking at it for this reason, other customers are looking at it for that reason. So as an example, if you're a property owner, you're looking for the water savings, you're looking for the money. Everything's about this. So you're looking for this type of equipment to save money from that standpoint. You also need to do it to comply with local regulations. So a lot of areas are saying, hey, you got to put in smart controllers on any new installation, 1881, so be it. Again, you're also looking at water-related damage. I want to eliminate runoff, there's liability. I want to eliminate damage to my buildings and so on. So they're looking at it from their standpoint. There are some customers that like to brand themselves as being water conscious, environmentally conscious, and so on, so they'll use smart technology as a way of standing apart from their competition. Hey, ABC, company, we're out there doing our part, and we're saving the world by using smart technology. Property owners, landscape managers, they're looking at it from the standpoint, well, if I have systems out in the field that are automatically rescheduling themselves to the changes in weather, that's a guy that I can save to go do something else. So instead of having to worry about this guy running around all the time just readjusting clocks, I can take him and I can have him go out there and look at the irrigation systems and troubleshoot and do a better job and maintain a better overall landscape. So it's a labor savings that I can route to some other area. Obviously, the remote online capabilities is a benefit. So again, now I'm saving on equipment costs. I'm saving on time not having to run to the clocks to be able to do this remote irrigation. Obviously, enhanced flow and system monitoring is important to them. They want to be able to monitor real flow usage. They want to be able to respond to breaks in lateral lines, in main lines, stuck valves and whatnot, because that's expensive and damaging. And they also get better reporting tools. With a centralized or a smart technology system that's web-based, you have a lot of information that's being stored that you can run all sorts of really cool reports. I can see actually what I am doing this year versus last year. I can see what I'm doing this week versus the same week last year or last week or whatever the case happens to be. So we store all of that information on the servers, so you have a lot of information there that you can use for doing reports. And obviously it makes us in compliance with whatever the regulations are. And this side is really for the water operators. They can do a better job of balancing their load of water usage. How many people think that these big breaks that we're having in LA have something to do with the water regulations? I do. It just always seems that whenever we start having these, you can only water Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we start having big giant mainline breaks. I don't know if it's because on those other days there's so little water movement in those pipes, that the water pressure is really high, out of the norm, and it's causing problems. I kind of think that's the way it's going. But okay, so a typical web-based smart system, how does it operate? So let's look at it. Well, first of all, the user will go ahead and create a profile online for his product. And he'll go in there and put all the information on the stations. Station number 1 is doing turf, and it's got spray heads. And station number 2 is doing drip on ground cover that's drought tolerant. Station 3's got trees with bubblers and so on. So You enter all of that online as far as your system is concerned. Then you have the local weather network that is looking at the ET and also looking at rainfall. So a lot of these systems is able to take advantage of the actual rainfall amounts and calculate that into the schedules. So I live in Brea, so we had about a half an inch of rain on Saturday. We had about a half an inch of rain on Sunday. I looked at my system last night, and my system is not scheduled to water anything for the next 7 days. So it's taken that inch of irrigation that was thrown on the landscape, and it's calculating that in for the water use moving forward. Yes?
I have a question
Yeah.
about the ET and like what you're talking about right now, that if we have rain, in the future the temperature's going to go up, the ET will go up. How long does it take for it to change the actual run time?
The way it works on some systems, and this goes back even back to the Rainbird days, is we use a feature called, what is it called? I'm drawing a blank right now. Well, I'll describe it as it's a tank. It's your gas tank in your car. So what we do is that we will only schedule irrigation until 50% of the water has been used in your landscape. Now, most of us do that mathematically. We know the soil type. We know the rooting depth you've given us. We know the application rate, the precip of what's going on. We know the ET. So mathematically, we can calculate at what point is that tank half empty. When you're driving around in your car, depending on what you're doing, it may take you a day to get the tank half empty. It may take you a week. But we're monitoring that. So what happens is when the tank gets half empty, we then schedule an irrigation event the next opportunity. Not right now, because you're not telling me I can water right now. You're telling me, in fact, I can't even water tomorrow, because tomorrow's an off day. So the next opportunity might be in 2 days. At that point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to schedule irrigation. And again, mathematically, I can then know how much water went down, how much of that got back in the soil. Is the tank full? Our goal is to try to fill the tank. The one thing we can do is we can adjust the fill point. So if it's spray head, if it's rotors, we typically wait until half the water has been used up in the soil before we will schedule an event. If it's subsurface, if it's drip, or if it's bubblers, typically those manufacturers say, hey, look, we don't want the ground to get really dry, because when it gets really dry and then I put the dripper back on, it doesn't wet the soil. It goes off or it goes straight down. So they typically like the irrigation of the soil to be more evenly moist. So for those kind of applications, you can adjust or will adjust the soil moisture retention percentage down to maybe 25%. So we water a little more often, but not as much. But we're keeping the ground more evenly moist to satisfy those requirements from that standpoint. Yeah. Okay. So then the servers look at the ET and the schedules, and they make the determination as to what the schedules need to be. And in our system, we send those schedules down daily. We send a 7-day block down, but we send that information daily. And the reason we do that is we want to make sure the clock always has the latest 7-day schedule in it. We also want to pull back any history. So I want to know what happened. Did we have any issues last night with flow or electrical issues? Did it really irrigate? Was there a power outage? I want to get all that information back. So we do that on a daily basis. In our case, we only take about 15 to 30 seconds of communication per controller in the field, because the controller is just sending the data and then it's off. The clock makes its own decisions on what to do after that standpoint. And then the controllers in the field connect wirelessly to get that exchange taking place. If we lose communication, our system doesn't go down. We have a 7-day schedule in there, like a conventional schedule. Even if it fails over the next 7 days, it just repeats itself again. You're going to know immediately, though, that we're missing communication yesterday. Something's going on. Send a guy out there, because it might not be communication you're missing. It might be you're missing power, and now there's no irrigation taking place in the field from that standpoint. And then again, the controllers in the field will operate those schedules accordingly. And this just shows you kind of how many weather stations are out there. Do we all know what ET is? Basically, it's the amount of water that's evaporating from the soil and the amount of water that's being used by the plants through transpiration. That's the total water use. We all understand that. I'm sure if we're in this business, we do. Okay. So again, the big question is, can they work with the current water restrictions? And for the most part, the answer is yes. If you're working with an area where they're saying you're limited to a 2 or 3 day a week water schedule, for the most part, most manufacturers will work around that if they can. So you tell us the opportunity days. You say I can water Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. and then we will adjust our schedules to fit into that. The only problem you're really going to get into would be if you're in the middle of summer and you got very large controllers, you got, let's say, 48 station clocks that have long runtime stations like rotors. Mathematically, you might not have enough time to get everything done. It's just math. You know, if you're telling me I only get a 10-hour water window and only 3 days of, to get the irrigation done, and I got all these 45-minute stations, it's just math. It can't happen. So you do have to consider that. What is this? Okay, so this is my, I just took a picture of my home clock. So I'm looking at a station that's it's a lawn area. I have St. Augustine on this area here. And this is the last 30 days. So this was when I took the picture, which was yesterday. And this shows you the past 30 days. The water droplets represent a day it actually irrigated. The gray hand is a day that the system suspended the irrigation because of rainfall coming. And then the clouds are actual days where it irrigated. And then the little slash there are days that I wouldn't allow it to water. I could say it's because of restrictions of water usage. To be honest, it's because a gardener comes on that day. I don't want the ground wet. Okay, I'll be honest about it. So you can see that in here, and I have my system watering at 90% of water budget. I have the soil moisture depletion at 50s because it's overhead spray. And yet for the last month I irrigated 7 times on my lawn. Okay? My lawn looks great.
You have St. Augustine.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have St. Augustine in some areas, and then I have other areas that's hybrid Bermuda. So it's kind of warm season grass anyway. My lawn doesn't look like it's suffering at all. This is where it gets frustrating to us in the business, the fact that we're going from this extreme, my neighbor next door, our lawn's attached, we don't have any fencing there so the kids can play. 7 days a week watering. And then you come over to mine, and I'm barely giving it maybe 2 a week, if I'm lucky, in the middle of summer. Our lawns look identical. But then you get the guy next door, he just turned his water off completely. And it's just brown as can
How
be.
long are you?
What's that?
How long is duration of time? 7?
20 minutes, so it's spray head, so it's basically, it takes 60 minutes to get like an inch, 1.8 inches down, and it's watering about twice a week, so I'm getting about 40 minutes down for the week, which represents what, 0.7 inches, so I'm watering a lot less than I really should be, yeah.
When you're saying your water adjustment, you're watering 90% of budget, is that associated with your 20-minute run time, or you're actually running 90% of 20 minutes?
No, the 20 minutes is what it's actually putting down. The reason for the 90% is you put all the data into the system. I know, again, I used to be the product manager at Rainbird on spray heads, so I know what the Rainbird spray heads put out. 1.82 inches per hour on average. So I overrode my system, I put that number in there. I know what kind of soil that I have. I know the ET. So I have all the information, I put it in. That's factual information. Now the system says run for 24 minutes. So I start putting 24 minutes down and notice, you know what, I wonder if I can cut it back a little bit. Because again, that's in essence 100% of ET. I know for a fact no one's got to run at 100% of ET. So I cut it back to 95%. Still looks pretty good. I cut it back to 90%. Still looks good. I cut it back to 85%. Oh, so now all of a sudden I'm getting a couple brown spots, a couple hot spots on my lawn. So at that point I have a choice. Try to fix the irrigation system, maybe move heads around or change the nozzling, or just bump the ET back up a little bit. So in my case, I just bumped it back up to 90 from 85.
That's in areas where you have hardscape, right? I guess you're St. Augustine where you get the dry spots?
No, I just got this one really weird spot. I don't know, maybe it's like when the soil was initially done, it's a harder soil there. Maybe there's a dead body laying under the ground. I don't know. But this one area just always seems to be kind of the hot spot.
You know, Rainbird 1800s?
Yeah, I know. I have Hunter pop-up sprays because they have a better seal, but I have Van nozzles on top of them.
Van?
Yeah, and their DU is not as good. That could be part of the deal too. And I have a gardener that loves his weed trimmer. Holy crap, man, that guy goes out there and just rips heads off all the time. I go, leave my sprinklers alone. I don't want to see him. Don't even look at him. He gets out there and just weed whips around him, and those Van nozzles get spun, and you go out there and go, where in the hell is the water going? And the water's spraying backwards, so it's kind of a pain.
And those Van nozzles aren't wiping out your wipers on the hundreds?
No, they seem, no, I have no issues with that. No blow-by or anything on those. Okay? Yes?
Yeah,
Hey, Anthony, Mariposa,
What's going on here?
make sure that when you're doing his yard and stuff, that you don't. I normally see a big Mariposa truck out front of Mark's house.
Did you say 1.8?
2.
per hour?
1.82 inches per hour. 1.82 inches per hour.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So they say that we need to go back to 2014 for our water budget. So do you have a historical from what you watered in 2013?
I do, because I've been using this system since 2008. So if I wanted to do a report, I could do total water usage by station for July of 2013 versus the same station for the whole month in 2015. And I could do a comparison there.
So could you cut to 20%?
Probably not. Because to be honest about it, this is where the whole issue lies, is the fact that they're coming to everybody going, cut it back 25%. I go, time out. I've been irrigating efficiently now for 5 years. My neighbors, you could swim in his lawn. And now all of a sudden, cut back 25%. He's tickled pink. His lawn's going to look better. And my lawn's going, hey, I'm already at the edge. This isn't fair. I think the reason they're doing it is because they're lazy. It's easy just to say 25% for everybody. They don't want to say, well, you're going to allow only so much per acre of landscaping, or whatever the case happens to be. So that's where we're getting in trouble. The guys that have done a really good job of managing and maintaining their landscapes, they're going to suffer through this because they've already been doing a good job of cutting the irrigation back. To tell those guys that are already at the edge to cut back another 25%, it's not fair. I had a guy that tried to do everything right, went for the nozzle program, put in these really low precip nozzles, probably the MP rotators. He did everything, and then the water district says you can only water 15 minutes total twice a week. Well, he's maintaining a commercial property, and if the property looks like crap, people aren't going to want to rent. So he tries to do it. It isn't working. Now he's getting chewed out by the guy that owns the property going, this isn't working here. You're doing a really lousy job. He said, I'm just trying to follow the guidelines. So he goes to the water district and goes, hey, you paid me to put these nozzles in. 15 minutes isn't cutting it. Sorry. So you know what he does? Yanks the nozzles. Puts those big gallonage nozzles back on there that put out a precip rate that's 3 times as much as a low precip. So if you're going to play the game, then I'll play the game. So he's able to push more water down in that 15-minute time frame. Okay? No one's got recorders going, right?
Speak louder.
Yeah. Okay, that didn't work either. This is a year or 2 ago. He goes, if I do the math and I look at my landscape, there's still not enough time to get this done. I go, okay, what can we do? And I says, well, I didn't tell you this, but, because he got reprimanded by the water police. It was running for more than 15 minutes. I says, we have a cycle and soak feature built in. Why don't you set your maximum cycle length to 15 minutes? And then after 15 minutes, it goes off and does other things. So if the guy's sitting there with his stopwatch, recording it, he's going to see 15 minutes of he's not going to sit there all night long. He'll do the 15 on one station, maybe 15 on another station, and he'll leave, go do something else. So he did that. Now again, he's watering the right way, but this wouldn't work according to restrictions. Yeah, he did that, everything's fine and dandy. Okay, so we had to play the games from that standpoint. It's a shame you have to, but you have to. We talk about the guy in Caltrans. So he comes down the 210 freeway. I go, what do you do? He goes, he says, I set up my controllers based by groups. He says, so I have the Glendora Water District group, then I have the Sierra Madre Water group, and then I have the Pasadena group. He says, in every one of these areas, because I'm paying a different water agency, they all have different restrictions, every one of them. This guy says, because you have smart controllers, no restrictions. Just keep the irrigation to nighttime hours. We know you have smart technology. It's going to put down the right amount of water. You're free to do what you want. Next guy says, no, you're limited to 3 days a week watering, but there's no restrictions on runtime because you have smart technology, and it puts down your need. Then you go down the freeway, and you got the next guy going, no, 3 days a week watering, 15-minute max. So, it's just, there's no consistency with these water agencies and exactly what they want you to do. And to be honest, they're kind of hard to talk to. Okay, so why use them with the water restrictions? Water savings. We talk about flow monitoring. If no other reason, if you have flow sensing out there, you have the ability to monitor and respond to breaks or stuck valves. Yeah, you had a question?
Our city's broke, flow monitor. How do we do that with the broke city?
Well, it's kind of like pay me now or pay me later. So, you know, again, if you don't do something, then when you have those big breaks, you're going to be putting a lot more money out of pocket. Because again, a big break can cause a lot of problems. It can be a big water waster for one. But secondly, depending where that break occurred, it could be property damage, it could be slopes falling, it could be liability, it could be water in the street. So it's kind of like, you know, pay me now or pay me later. Yeah.
So is there a flow monitoring valve you put behind every controller? Is that what it is?
Well, what I was going to show here, 'cause I figured somebody would ask the question. So here's what happens. Everybody says, well, I want to do flow sensing, but how do I add a flow sensor now after the fact? I don't have any extra wires that's running from where my clock is sitting back to where my point of connection is. Now, there are some products in the market that do like radio transmission for flow, waste of time, expensive, and it just doesn't work. I've had a lot of experience using this on various systems. It doesn't work well. There's two products on the market that will basically share the wire. So if your clock's sitting here and your point of connection meter's way over there, your clock's probably sitting in a landscape area, which means there's a valve somewhere around that clock that has wire going to it. So these systems actually will take those wires and they'll share that wire path for a master valve, a flow sensor, and the station. So they have these units. So what you're looking at here in this product is called the Pathway. What they have here is out in the field, they have this little device plugged in here. Two wires go to that two-wire path going back to the clock, the common and the station. And then the other wires coming out, two go to the flow sensor, two go to the master valve, two go to the station you're stealing. Back at the clock, you have another little box. It takes power, but then you have two wires going to the common and the station running back out to the field, and you have master valve, flow sensor, and the station. As far as our clock is concerned, or anybody's clock, we are unaware that there's not a separate pair of wires for each device. We don't see it. As far as we're concerned, there's a pair of wires going to the valve, a pair of wires going to the master valve, a pair of wires going to the flow sensor. This device saves me having to run any extra wires. So there's two on the market. One's called the Pathway by CST, and then the second product on the market is called the 2-Core 3D. The advantage of the 2-Core 3D is, in addition to allowing you to have a flow sensor master valve added, it also allows you to add up to 12 extra valves. So if you had an area where you wanted to do flow sensing and master valve, but you also want to add a few more valves, this one has that capability. The other one doesn't. It's simply used for adding a flow sensor and a master valve. But that one's cheaper. So they kind of have their pluses and minuses.
Cheaper, what is cheaper?
I think the 2-core unit is somewhere in the $1,400 range, and the Pathway unit somewhere in maybe the $500 or $600 range. So it's quite a bit cheaper.
What is $1,400 times 89?
It's one per clock.
89 clocks.
Okay. And then the other thing is, obviously, you have to have a flow sensor and you have to have a master valve. One doesn't do good with the other. Putting a flow sensor out there without a master valve, what good is that? You have a break. Thanks for telling me. You can't do anything about it, but hey, there's a break. Okay, so that makes no sense from that standpoint.
Get some overtime going out there.
Right. But again, you look at the math of what happens if you were to have one major blowout. You know, if these guys in Anaheim have a big blowout on Harbor Boulevard, you know, and you have a bunch of cars screaming down there and somebody gets hurt because they slipped on the wet street, how expensive were those flow sensors? They look pretty cheap now. So it's, you know, a lot of ways to look at it. Where were we? Back here, back here. Water savings, flow monitoring, remote adjusting. That's one of the other big things. Even if you can't look at these savings because you're limited to a 2 or 3 day watering cycle, with these smart systems, these web-based systems, you still have the ability to make the changes remotely, even if it's manual changes. We have some guys that they don't use the ET because it doesn't make sense in the middle of summer for them because there's not enough time. But they still have the ability to go in there and make those changes remotely. So if they do run into a cool spell or the rain over the last weekend, they can at least turn the clocks off remotely. They don't have to send a guy running around. You know, we deal with the city of Long Beach, and they tell me it takes a guy 7 days to go to every clock. 7 days. And then another 7 days to turn it back on again. So in a lot of cases, they don't do it because it doesn't make financial sense to go ahead and do that. Obviously, labor savings, I'm saving that guy running around for 14 days. Remote troubleshooting, I'm going to tell you whether you have an electrical problem. I'm going to tell you whether you have a flow issue out in the field. That's the real benefit to these kinds of systems also. It saves you that guy running out. You might be able to troubleshoot stuff remotely and find out that he has nothing to do with the field. You know, I'm not going to waste the guy going out there. And then, of course, remote rain shutdown, or shutdown for whatever reason. You know, they're having some sort of event at the park this weekend, or they're having the parade, or whatever the case happens to be. I save the hassle of running out there and shutting things down. Or vice versa, I can turn things on. The story I always tell is we have 14 of our controllers that run the LA City Hall complex. And a couple of years ago, we had those boycotter people, what were they called? They were camping out on the south lawn. That works. What were they called? Occupy. And every afternoon I come home, long day of working, sitting in front of my TV set with my Pinot Grigio. Sorry, I don't drink beer, Pinot Grigio. And I'm watching these guys being interviewed on the south lawn, and I am so tempted to get on, because I got the guy's access. I am so tempted to, I know which clock it is. I know what valve it is. I am so tempted to sit there and just go, oh yeah, and just watch people run. But the problem is, they would know who got on too. They would do a little report and go, who was logged on at that point? Oh, I see it was Pedicone was not logged on, so couldn't do that. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, the solenoids, when you shut them off for long duration and turn them back on, at times you're going to have a problem.
That's where we talk about the soil moisture depletion percentage. We set it at 50. What you find in a typical winter, which we haven't had in a long time, you'll find that in a typical winter, the valves will want to come on once every 2 or 3 weeks. And the guys say, hey, that doesn't work because my valves are so old that if they don't get exercised, they get stuck. They either oil can the diaphragm or the cellular area gets crap built up in it, or whatever the case happens to be. We need to move them on and off once in a while. So many guys in the middle of wintertime, they'll take that soil moisture depletion number from 50, they'll bring it down all the way to 15%, which means the system will water a lot more frequently, but really short run times. So they just pop up for a minute or two and drop down. But the advantage is it keeps the valves going, it keeps water flowing through those valves, keeps them operating. Now the other advantage is systems like ours is we have what is called grouping function. And grouping function allows you to make mass changes to groups of valves. So if I had those valves that had problems turning on and off, and they were all my lawn valves on this park, and I had 8 controllers, I can make a group of all of my lawn valves, and I can make that change to that group. I don't have to go clock by clock, valve by valve to make the change. I can make a group to the lawn stations. It would automatically reprogram all of those valves. So I have a guy here in Talega, South Orange County, 208 controllers. He's got thousands and thousands of valves. He can make changes to every tree valve like that. He can make changes to all turf valves like that. If he changed the mow day because there's maybe a manpower load change, they can't mow this Thursday, they have to hold it off till Friday. He can change the block day from Thursday to Friday on all those lawn valves within a couple, minutes, and he's done. You can't do that if you have conventional clocks. Okay? So, when not to use them? Okay, let's talk about it. You have unlimited water. Anybody here have unlimited water? Okay, so that's not going to be a reason. Pipe breaks are fun. Aren't they fun? You get to see the water flowing down the street. It's a lot of fun, so why bother from that standpoint? You like running around programming. Now, you may think this one's a joke. It is not a joke. I have run into people that say, I like what I do. I like spending my day running around in my car reprogramming clocks. Yeah, but see, if you put these systems in, they do, no. I like this. This is my job. I get to go to the donut shop first thing in the morning. Then I spend the next 6 hours readjusting clocks, and I'm done for the day. I'm sorry, that's the real world. There are people that are like that. You have unlimited labor. You got a lot of guys, you got to use them, so send them around and reprogram the clocks. They're different. I hear this a lot too. This is different. I'm getting older. I've been doing this for a long time. I don't want to have to relearn anything. I don't like computers. I got a flip phone. I hate these smartphones. Right? You hear that? My brother hates technology. I need to order something on Amazon. He calls me up, order on Amazon. So, he doesn't know that I'm actually getting it cheaper than what he's paying for, but I got to make a little money on it. So again, you do run into these people that are out there also. There's a learning curve. On any product, there's a learning curve. Some people are willing to tolerate it and work with it. Other people aren't willing to work with it. Set it and forget it. That's another beauty of these smart controllers, right? You just get in there, you set that sucker up, and away we go. No, not a chance. Okay. There's a lot of other issues there. Obviously, you have to be monitoring and managing your smart system. You're going to have electrical problems. Things change and get old. You got to keep an eye on it. You got to manage the system. So no, you're not going to set it and forget it. There's always going to be flow issues if you have the technology. Stuck valves, heads knocked off, main lines, whatever the case happens to be, you got to be sitting on a daily basis. If nothing else, reading the alarm list every day. So in our case, we have what is called a daily digest. And it gives us a daily list of all of our issues for our project. You can easily go through that and go, okay, the flow issues I'm going to send to Joe, and maybe some programming issues I'll take care of myself, and electrical stuff when we get around to it, because they're still running, but they're starting to get marginal. Flow, this shows you, this is a controller for, I think this is a project in Vegas. And you'll notice that these station flows here, this is 5.5, 6.5, and so on. These flows are automatically learned. No one went into the system and filled out a database. The system was told what size and type of flow sensor, so we know what these pulse rates represent as far as flow, and we automatically learn the flows. What you notice is the station there, number 8, hasn't learned flow. What's going on? There are kind of minimum tolerances of any kind of product, what a product can do. I can't drive my car 200 miles an hour. It won't go that fast. When I talk about flow sensing, they are mechanical devices. Either they have a little impeller in the water flow that's spinning, or they have an impeller spinning if it's a hydrometer, but it's got to move. If the flow rate is so low that the water is traveling so slowly that it can't spin the wheel, I can't see the flow. It's just common sense. So if you look at this, these are really low flow rates. I'm surprised I can read half of these. So, 1.5 gallons, 1.5 gallons, 1.5 gallons, 1 gallon. This is on the this is even below the low end of what the flow sensor manufacturer recommends. So these flow rates are really, really low. So in the case of maybe station number 8 here, because it's drip, the flow rate's below that, I just can't read it. So there's this common sense when you're using this stuff. You can't do everything. You get to a point where what makes financial sense? Could I put a smaller flow sensor in to restrict it way down? Yeah, does that make sense? Probably not. I thought I already covered this. The flow issues, low, high, stuck valves, water window. Again, you're going to get into problems with the water window because there's only so much hours in a day. So this is our system, and what happens here is I'm allowing 11 hours of irrigation, but he needs to run for 27 hours. Guess what? That ain't going to happen. So this is kind of like a midsummer schedule with a lot of long runtime stations, and there's just not, mathematically it doesn't work. So in our particular case here, we have the option of either bumping the stations that can't complete to the next opportunity, or we could also select compress the entire schedule down so everything gets a little bit. So you have those options there. But again, mathematically, there are some instances where you just can't get it done. If the water district is being too restrictive and you went and put those MP rotators out there that need to run 3 times as long, you're changing the design and you're putting yourself kind of behind the 8 ball. Plant material. It's always growing. You can't just set something and walk away from it because you know what? That root zone was this when you planted it, and then it's this, and then it's this, and then it's this. I have a guy in Northern California that every spring he has to go in and change his system because he normally has a wet winter, which we haven't had recently. But normally after a normal winter, his roots on his lawns have died back. So his lawn roots are very, very shallow. So when he comes out of the wintertime, he has to change it in the system. Otherwise, I'm trying to adjust for an 8-inch root when there's only 2 inches of roots. So he comes into the system, he uses the grouping function, he changes it 2 inches, then he leaves it alone for about 3 weeks, then he makes it 3 inches, then he leaves it alone for a few weeks and changes 4 inches and so on. So he has the ability to adjust for the growing of the plant material. If you're in the desert, guys overseed every year. They still go out there and overseed perennial ryegrass on every lawn that's left out there. So when you do that, you obviously have to make changes in how you're going to schedule. You're not watering every 3 nights for 5 minutes. You're watering 4 start times a day for 3 minutes to keep the grass seed damp until it gets up enough, and then you convert over from that standpoint. Manual watering obviously will add to the usage. We see that a lot. We do have the ability in our system to monitor how the water was used. So we'll give you a bar, and we'll take on that bar, here's your total water usage. This much of it was because the clock scheduled it. This much of it was because some guy was on his phone or his tablet. And then this much of it was because somebody was out there bleeding valves. And if I run the report and I see that a third of my water is being used by somebody bleeding valves, I'm going to go talk to somebody. What are you doing? You don't need to use that much water just to check and see if the heads are still there. You know, but you run into that a lot. You run into guys that they like to go out in the field and just bleed valves. And then you have to look at the economics of smart controllers. You know, people say, well, I can't afford to put them in. Well, can you afford not to put them in? Because this is only going to get worse. The cost of water is only going to go up. It's not going to go down. It's only going to go higher. So you spend a little bit now to save more later. The advantage that we have here in California is we have the rebate programs Tom was talking about. If you're a public agency and they're paying you $55 a station, that's a lot of money. You know, a 10-station clock, $550. 20-station clock, $1,000. A 40-station clock, you know, $2,000. That's a lot of money. That goes a long ways towards paying for the equipment costs. A lot of areas in the country don't have that. It's all money out of pocket. So you have those advantages that are there. You also have the advantages of applying for grants. We've had a lot of large projects where they apply for grants and they get the money for that. You know, yeah, it takes time, it takes effort, you got to know what you're doing, but if you're serious about it, you can go ahead and apply for those and get that thing done. And do you want it to work? Again, if you want to make this stuff work, it will work. If you go into it with a negative attitude, you don't want smart controllers to work, it's different, I don't want to have to go through a learning curve, then it's going to fail for you. You know, I know, again, I love to sit up here and say, I'm the only guy in the world that can make a smart controller. No. I have plenty of competition. All their stuff works. We all have our pluses and minuses. Maybe mine works better in this application where theirs works better in that application, but we all basically will work. So we know the product is functional. We know it can work. We know it can save you money. We know it can save you time and labor. It's just a fact of whether you want it to work or not. And then, of course, then behind all of this, we have this happening. So we're all struggling for this water, and we're being reported now that the largest El Nino in history has already started in California. These storms of last week were part of this El Nino, so who knows what's going to happen in the future. You know, this whole water conservation thing could be dead in 6 months. We could have the wettest winter in history, and all the reservoirs refill themselves up again, and it doesn't matter. Or this could be, you know, a fallacy or a farce and it not happen, and we're going to be in the same boat, if not worse, next year. So who knows? Okay. Any questions? Comments? I think the lunch is here. Richard?
Yep. I want to thank everybody to make sure that that you guys came. I really appreciate you guys all coming out. I want to thank Mark Pedicone for doing such a good job. I want to give him a round of applause. Exactly what Mark said. You know, a lot of manufacturers have a lot of great products. One works a little better in this area and that. But I mean, I really like people like Mark and how he speaks and what he talks about. So a lot of products are equal, but it's really who you buy from and after the sale, how that a manufacturer takes care of you. There's a lot of manufacturers out there that make some pretty good stuff. Always pick the people that will follow through. And I know I've recommended, I don't represent Mark, I don't get any money from him unless he, you know, comes to something and helps sponsor. But I just like his personality. I like to hang around people that I know that will follow up. And that makes our job easier in the field when you set yourself around a good team of people. I really appreciate everybody coming. I appreciate Mariposa coming. It shows their commitment, and it shows ESV's commitment, C&G coming. These contractors, a lot of them don't come to events. And when you guys are making choices at the cities and looking for really good people, these are the kind of people that commit themselves to listening and coming to these kind of events. I appreciate all the cities and you guys coming out, because then you get to pass on and tell everybody what's going on. If you've got events or things that you would like us to do, we would like you, to email us and tell us, hey, we'd really like to learn this or this, and we'll come and we'll do another lunch and learn on those subjects. So I really do appreciate Village Nursery, Del Bell. Hydro Rain snuck in because they were just coming in for the lunch, but they're coming in. So I know all the other vendors did their whole dog and pony show, but that's Ryan in the back. and he's from Hydro Rain from Utah. They just flew in just to come to this lunch and learn. They'll be here 5 minutes, so make sure you do talk to them. And then Alan, he's the area manager. So for Hydro Rain, they got a little table back there. Make sure you guys get samples. You talk to them about their product line. They support our organization. They're one of our supporters of Irrigator Tech. And Del Bell, he has the best valve box in the market with a dirt skirt on it. Get a sample. He will run out. He will bring you the sample on the valve boxes. It's the best valve box in the market. You heard everything from Village Nursery, all their support to the industry, and we really appreciate them coming and Greg coming. So thanks a lot. Enjoy the lunch there. We have some drinks there. Thanks a lot for all your support. Make sure we all network and everything. Thanks a lot for coming.